Okay, I'm back again to put the ribber and can on in my sock to make the mate to this sock. Whoops, let me zoom out a little bit so you can see which sock we're making. Okay, we are making the mate to this sock. This is what we're working on right now. And we already did in the last video, we made the E-wrap edge, okay? For the mate to this sock. And that is where the sock machine is right at the moment, is it is waiting on me now to put the ribber on so we can make the cuff. Okay, this is a fold over cuff. It's a fold over cuff like this. Okay, and I'm using a 54 cylinder, and I'm going to do 60 rounds on of this cuff. But now I have to put the ribber on. The first thing I'm going to do though before I put the ribber on is that when I made my E-wrap cuff, I already showed you that I had reset the counter and that I had taken the heel spring off. I did not show you that I also need to take off this clip that had held those beginning strings. And I now need to show you that. We need to take that clip off also. Okay, now back on to working on making, putting on the ribber. We're going to zoom in. Okay, we had stopped with the yarn carrier at the 6 o'clock. We had wrapped, we had done our E-wrap and had done 1 3/4 rounds with the heel spring on, and we had stopped right here with the yarn carrier at 6 o'clock. So now we're going to talk about the ribber. There is so much stuff to say about the ribber. Okay, especially as a reasonably new person, the ribber can be very, very intimidating. And you don't have to be intimidated. You just have to pay attention to details. And in paying attention to details, first of all, you need to know, and I'm sure you guys already know this, that the ribber has a pin inside of it, like this. Okay, see the pin like this? Okay, this 54 cylinder has one of those too. Now, I've marked my pin right here. It is right here on this needle. Okay, it's at my 6 o'clock needle right here. Okay, and it's marked on my cylinder. And so all I need to do is I now need to line up what is my fin. My fin, now what that pin does, by the way, is it kind of locks the fin, locks the ribber plate so that the ribber plate doesn't jiggle around while you're using it. Okay, and which is very important. Proper placement of the ribber plate is the #1 reason for improper placement of the ribber plate is the #1 reason for drop stitches when you're ribbing. So you have to make sure that you place this correctly. So what I did is not only did I mark the cylinder, I also marked my ribber plate, okay, because that makes it much easier to be able to place this correctly. So in placing it, of course, you slide your ribber arm into the camshell just a little bit, and then you very carefully pay attention to the details here. Remember, paying attention to the details. You make sure that the mark on your ribber plate, ribber dial, lines up with the proper needle mark on your cylinder. And you very carefully slide that in, making sure that you get the proper placement, because that is the #1 reason why you get drop stitches, is improper placement of the ribber dial. Okay, so making sure that you get this placed correctly is the #1 reason. There you go. Okay, I've got that placed in there, and you'll know it's placed in there correctly because it won't jiggle. Okay, it won't go forward any at all. That should not have any movement going forward at all. Now, you did notice that my tappet plate was kind of up here out of my way so I could see what I was doing. Now I'm going to slide that tappet plate back around again, and it's going to hit up against the ribber pin. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need to do is make sure that you tighten down your ribber arm. Always, that's something I've actually forgotten to do, and that does cause major issues. do not forget to tighten down your ribber arm. Okay, there's a little screw back here in the back, right by where you slid your ribber arm in. Make sure you tighten that down because I have forgotten to do that. Okay, now I'm going to try to adjust the camera a little bit again. I'm going to pause you for just a minute while I try to adjust the camera. Pause. Hi again. Okay, now what we're doing is the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over here. Now this is the tappet plate. And remember, I just scooted it back against the ribber pin. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start switching out. My ribbing is a 1x1. So I'm going to be starting to switch out every other cylinder needle into a ribber needle. First thing I'm going to do, I hope you can see what I'm doing here, is this is my little bowl of ribber needles. Ta-da, my little bowl of ribber needles. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on them because I like oily ribber needles. Put some little oil on them. I like oily ribber needles. Boy, that's a hard word to say. Anyways, okay. Now, there are two different ways that I have learned, and this is just me. Remember, when you watch my videos, you are watching how I have learned how to do things. Other people may do things differently than me. This is how I have learned how to do things. There are two different ways that I have learned how to change out my ribber needles and my cylinder needles over to ribber needles. One of the ways is to put the ribber needle. Now remember, you want to make sure that this is lined up. Okay, I'm starting with the 3 o'clock needle here. One of the ways is to put the ribber needle first into the ribber plate. Okay, and then remember, I do not like to lift my cylinder needles with my fingers because they're pokey. So I'm going to lift it with my pick tool. Okay, so one of the ways is to put your ribber needle in, lift your cylinder needle, and then holding your ribber needle, transfer the stitch over to your ribber needle, just like this. But you got to be very, very careful. Remember what I said about attention to detail. This is attention to detail. You need to pay attention and make sure that you got the full stitch over. You poked through the stitch. You lifted open. You saw how I lifted up that needle, the cylinder needle, and I poked the ribber needle through the stitch to be able to transfer it over. You got to make sure that it does not get behind the latch on the ribber needle. It has to stay only in the actual little, can you see me? Only in the actual little hook of the ribber needle. Do not get behind the latch of the ribber needle. If you get behind the latch of the ribber needle, it will drop. The stitch will drop. Okay? So stay only in the hook of the ribber needle with your stitch. Very important. Critically important. So anyway, so once you've got it only in the hook of the ribber needle, then you can, and you notice I'm always holding the ribber needle the whole time I'm doing this. Once you're sure the stitch is over there and it's safely over there onto your ribber needle, then you can gently pull your cylinder needle just right out through the bottom. Okay, that's one of the ways that you can transfer the stitch over. Okay, the other way you can transfer it over is you can lift up and you can pull the cylinder needle forward. You can take your ribber needle and go in behind the cylinder needle, coming from the top and going downward. And there's like a little space back here behind your cylinder needle. And you can grab that again, only getting that into the hook. Flipping your ribber needle over onto its back and popping it into its little slot that it belongs in. Okay, once you're sure it's securely into its slot, and again, it has stayed only into the hook and not, the stitch has stayed securely into the hook and not gotten behind the latch, and you're sure that the stitch is correct and where it belongs, then you can gently pull the cylinder needle out through the bottom. Doop, there it goes. And secure the ribbon needle into its slot. Those are the two ways that I know to be able to transfer the stitch from the cylinder needle over to the ribbon needle. You can do whichever way you're most comfortable with, whichever way you find easier or faster. I'm going to work on doing a couple of these, and then I will be back in just a moment to show you some more tricks and things that I've learned. But as usual, when I start being repetitive, I put you on pause. Okay, I've gone a little distance here, and I've done a few of these transfers from my ribber to my from my cylinder to my ribber needles, and I'm starting to run into the ribber arm. It's starting to get in my way, and it's starting to make it difficult for me to continue. So what do I do now? Now I start moving my yarn carrier, and that's going to move my ribber arm out of my way a little bit. But I have to be very careful. Remember, attention to detail, be very careful. Because this tappet plate is way in front of my yarn carrier. And you're going to be surprised at just how fast that tappet plate starts to run over top of these, over top of your ribber plate slots. So what I do, this sounds silly, but it's real. I put my finger right here to keep me from going too far too fast. So I'm going to go ahead and start cranking, but I'm going to put my finger over top of this to keep me from going too far too fast. Because see how fast that tappet plate comes forward? All of a sudden, before you know it, ta-da! Your tappet plate is right there into your work zone. So I put my finger there to keep me from accidentally running my tappet plate over my work zone too far. So I'm going to put you guys on pause, and I'm going to go back to work on transferring. But I wanted to show you that little tip. Okay, I have finished switching out all my needles. And what I'm hoping to be able to show you, and I gotta try to, it's hard for me to sit in front of the camera and try to crank this at the exact same time. What I'm gonna try to show you here is exactly where, nope, I'm gonna have to move the camera to the other side. Hold on, I'm gonna pause you one more time. I gotta move the camera to the other side. Okay, I think this is gonna show you what I wanna show you. Okay, what I wanna show you is where the yarn is supposed to be falling on these ribber needles. Okay, you're gonna see that as the yarn comes through, I want the yarn to be falling right at the throat of those ribber needles. See how that yarn is falling right at the throat of those ribber needles. That is very important, okay? That is very, very important, because if the yarn is falling just about any other location, you're increasing your risk of drop stitches. And there is an adjustment on the top of your tappet plate to be able to adjust your stitch length. And that adjustment, by the way, should be made when you're not when you're in the middle of making your sock, but that should be done when you're doing your test. Prior to making your sock, when you're doing your test swatch, and you're testing everything out. You shouldn't be in the middle of making your sock when you're verifying your stitch length. But if you're getting a problem with drop stitches, a lot of times it's because your stitch length is wrong. So you want to make sure that your yarn, when it comes through, is hitting right at the throat of your ribber needles, right there, right at your throat. I'm hoping that you're still seeing that. The camera's no longer following the yarn carrier. Scoot you guys over here where you can still see what's going on. Okay, see, you want it to fall right at the throat. Oh, now I can't reach the crank. You want it to fall right there at the throat. See, ta-da, right there at the throat. Okay, right there at the throat. That's where you want it to fall, right there. Right there. Isn't that gorgeous? That's exactly where you want it to fall. I wanted to point that out, okay, because that's very important. The other thing that I want to point out, and I might have to scoot the camera down just a little bit, is I want to point out that spacing between the cylinder and the ribber plate, okay? That too is very important. If you don't have the right spacing between your cylinder and your ribber plate, then again, you can run into problems. You can run into drop stitches. And there is an adjustment right here, right here. You see that brass screw that you use to tighten your ribber plate? Okay, your ribber arm? Underneath that, there is a little teeny tiny adjustment. With the Erlbacher, it came with the Erlbacher. Should have come with a little Allen wrench, Allen key like this. That can go up underneath there, a little Allen key like this. It can go up underneath there that can adjust the height of your ribber plate. Now you have to do that very carefully, very carefully. And again, it needs to be done on a test swatch, not while you're in the middle of your sock. And if you adjust the height of your ribber plate, you also may need to adjust the stitch length, because that may affect your stitch length and where your yarn falls on the ribber needles when your yarn carrier comes around. So I wanted to be able to share those little bits of information because those are things that I learned while I was working with this sock machine that affected my positive outcome working with the ribber. Anyways, at this point, I am going to be going around and around and around and around for a total of 60 rounds, which is going to be very repetitive. And then when I finish my 60 rounds, I'm going to be making a heel. And that's going to be another video. So I'm going to wrap up this video and see y'all in the next one. Thank you.